emotional and combination of those sensations and the thoughts that happen to go with them. And what happens with those thoughts and emotions in a lot of when feelings are thoughts and feelings, thoughts and sensations, they echo off of each other and build on each other, which can explain why our emotions are so real, so palpable, and they sometimes can inform us, but they sometimes can fool us. But they're important. And why I think we're talking about it today is because they're so neglected.
Yeah, I think so. And I think I've had a teacher once tell me that her students are so unevolved because their parents don't enrich them, that they only know two emotions, happy and sad. And I want to change that. I want to present young readers with the Dolch sight words, a beginning reader, so they can explore their feelings and have good communication of in a situation where they're having a feeling. And today I'd like to share with you a beginning of a book that I'm working on. And I know I made mistakes in it in terms of the word failure is not really an emotion, it's an emotional experience, right?
Well, I guess let's talk about the book. What'd you do?
Okay, let me show you the book, and I will pull it up, and you can tell me what you think. I mean, I probably need to reconsider it, and I think this is very important for parents or teachers and everybody to consider, that when they're working with modeling feelings for, how you express your feelings with a child, you really need to know how you really should be expressing them. So here I have in the story, and I'm just starting it, I have a few kids, and they're all together trying to jump on this little trampoline. And this little one kid comes up and says, I can go up, I can jump. And he does. And then everybody says, they all get up to the top, except for one kid. And he's afraid. He says, I cannot go up, I cannot jump. And they all coax him up there. And he says, I cannot jump. And they're all upset and they worry about him. And then he says, I feel like a failure when I cannot jump. And this is the part I need some editing in. Because first of all, how many kids do you know that talks like that? No, I don't know. Is that a proper way to express that feeling? Or what is really happening to that child when they give up? Do they just feel?
I don't think there is a kind of a properness or improperness. What I think is that when you say I feel like, or I feel that, what usually follows is not an emotion. I feel like you're treating me unfairly. That's not an emotion. I feel like a failure. So the question I guess I would ask in all these situations, and I think we find that happening. Humans find that that's what really happens in almost every conversation when somebody uses the word feel. They're really using the word to mean think. So I feel like a failure. Question is, what emotion does someone feel when they think they've failed? And there's no one answer to that. So I'm even just going to look at my feelings list right now. You can find feelings list on the internet and feelings wheels and all that. And they're very good starter points. For all we know, the kid could feel exhausted. The kid could feel embarrassed. That's a big one. By the way, embarrassed could mean I feel ashamed, chagrined, discomfited, self-conscious, mortified, so that's when we start to build
So
up a vocabulary.
maybe ashamed would be the one that I'm looking for
If you're
here.
looking, that's right, because it's about your specific book. Yeah. So if you want to try shame, that's a really potent emotion. And in our popular culture, you can see, and I'm sure you've seen that it's being talked about. I mean, it's becoming like a huge subject of conversation. Shame.
Well,
And maybe it is on my feed because I'm always looking up emotions.
see, you just gave me some gems that I'm going to use
Cool.
as I rewrite this. I thank you. Let me show you the rest of the book so far. So they all encourage him, and he goes up another way.
Ah, that's nice.
Yeah. And then we can all come up here. So I like the storyline that we can work together, and not everybody has to succeed in the same way and accomplish the same things the same way.
No, I agree. I absolutely. We wouldn't have, Sylvester Stallone versus Einstein if everybody succeeded the same way. Sylvester Stallone's a tremendous filmmaker. Einstein was a tremendous physicist. One thing about your books that we were talking about, I think yesterday or the day before, was that there's a function in situations like that makes it so sharing an emotion as opposed to what people usually do could create a situation that is better.
Like, what do you mean?
Well, in your book, you just showed me a panel from it. They all helped him. So that to me is kind of realistic. Now you cannot predict people. We're a bundle of nerves, literally, and we're random. We go this way and that way. With the same input, we might do this behavior with another input. But things like what people usually do is they fall off a trampoline. They start to get nervous and worried and embarrassed and ashamed. And the other people have emotions too. And a lot of times they might laugh or who knows what. And the person, let's say the first person to speak is the one who fell off the trampoline. And they would go, "Shut up, you guys are a bunch of idiots," right?
Yeah, that's why I'm writing these books, because it could go in disastrous ways.
Right, and that's what happens so commonly, at least in my life. The way I used to express myself more often, and I try to do that less and less. And it's that, but when I say it out loud, that instead of calling the kids a bunch of idiots for laughing, you pause and you think about what's going on inside you, and you see if you can find the emotion that's going on inside you, and you say it. That almost sounds crazy to me. And that's why people fear what we call intimacy.
Yeah, and that's that crystallizing moment that Susan David quotes Viktor Frankl between.
I lost you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Susan, what?
Susan David, the author who writes about emotions. She said, between the stimulus and a response lies our power. She quotes, I think it's Viktor Frankl.
Viktor Frankl. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, it's that moment. I mean, how many people take time to really stop? And I think it's that automatic thing. When you're teaching children at a very young, impressionable age, coping strategies or what you want to expose them to in terms of a go-to pattern to react to things, if you teach them the positive ways, maybe the next time they really are missing the trampoline, they might, instead of saying "you idiots," they're gonna say, "Oh, come, we'll all cheer you on."
And what's interesting is, again, it's not going to work every time. But if I were to say, instead of "stop laughing at me, you bunch of idiots," instead of saying that, if I say, "I just feel so ashamed right now," I have a really strong feeling that the reaction will be different. I don't know in what way, but those are just two different moments. Um, I can't promise that with kids it will always happen that way, especially when there are groups. But one never knows. And what's been experimented with most in our lives is always attacking back, or striking first, or shutting down, any, ultra protective. Um, but then those people do not know what's going on inside you, and they do not have a chance to care, is what I think is going on. So with kids, I really do think, of course, I think you would agree that it's very good if it's adult guided. So the expectation is set that you kids are going to express honestly, and you're going to react respectfully and with care. And I think that increases the chance with children
Yeah.
that they're going to be able to do the pattern.
Yeah, I think somebody pointed out to me that developmentally children need to hear a positive outcome when you talk about negative emotions, because they're at that parenting stage when they're 5, 6 years old, and everything they take in, they model, they imitate. So I think this is why these books are important, to model positive uh, reactions or positive strategies to cope with your emotions.
Yeah, we definitely learn well in stories. We probably learn tons from TV, true and false things. But when you present something as a story, it's kind of, I think one thing about learning in youth and actually in adults is that we learn from example. So we watch the people around us doing things, and even without trying, we begin to imitate it. So picture books, storybooks are great for that.
I wonder, as advice for teachers, what advice do you have about using these kind of books with kids?
Oh. You know what's funny about that? You know how I am. I'm not a teacher. Once you asked me how I could handle hearing all these really hard stories as a therapist, and I said, "How can you handle dealing with 30 young people every day?"
Yeah.
So it's still a mystery to me.
Yeah, my advice would be to read the book and then talk to them about what they would do if they couldn't jump, or if their friend couldn't jump.
Mhm. Yeah, and another thing you're doing there is you're asking them in a calm, teaching, discursive moment, that which is a very different atmosphere than in the real moment. So it's kind of backstage. You practice and rehearse and talk about it and plan and imagine backstage, and that can prep you for real life incidents. So they might, allow them to speak freely. I think maybe don't try to avoid sounding too critical if you hear some unpleasant answers. We're all working on it. We're all working on it. It's lucky that you're interested in teaching this to kids,
And
because
it's lucky that I have you to ask these questions.
one thing I want to say is that, again, this is this is theory that's applied in real hardcore incidents. A related theory. Well, I've talked about emotion theory, but this kind of conversation where we're trying to relate and try to get what we want in a situation, or need. Usually, I don't really think wanting and needing is that different. They come from drives that matter. It's the Harvard negotiation process that developed this, but it's interest-based relational communication and negotiation theory. And it's IRB, interest-based relational, IBR, interest-based relational. Interest means what's inside that's driving what a person's doing, what they're trying to get, what they're asking you for. So that's the internal interest. Whenever there is more than one person involved, there's a set of interests in this person and a set of interests in this person. And so relational means that this is, well, the part where I said there are two people at least. So this is being used for like hostage negotiations, for international
Wow.
relations negotiations, and that kind of thing. Um, one way we can think of it is that, let's say you just got triggered into an emotion and then you try to stuff it down. So this is the feelings list from the Nonviolent Communications website that I put, which is a formulation of a lot of this negotiation strategy that was sort of fashioned by Marshall Rosenberg. So this mirrors a lot of what different negotiations and couples therapy and family therapy and something I call empathic dialogue or even empathic assertiveness. A lot of it has a lot of similarities, but Marshall Rosenberg and his people made a list. And so instead of using words like positive and negative feelings, I like to use like words like pleasant and painful feelings, comfortable and uncomfortable feelings. You know, that really,
Wow. Yeah,
yeah. So
I like that.
I so I
Because
think
all feelings are, feelings aren't right or wrong. They just are.
yeah,
And to
absolutely.
call them negative is saying they're wrong.
Absolutely. I have found a lot of people who are very depressed and dissociated, and their pathway out of being numb and never motivated was anger. And that opened the doorway to the other list of emotions, you know. So they do it a little differently. They think of needs being met and unmet, and what kind of needs does a person feel when, what kind of feelings does a person feel when their needs are met versus unmet. So you can probably see that right here in the list.
Do you see one on there that you would pick for the kid that fell off the trampoline? It
Um,
helped me.
Well, let me say again, you can also think of them in two categories: the feelings I feel when I have my needs met and the feelings I feel when I don't have my needs met. And so you can see the list. Can you see the list right there?
I just see the Met needs.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Can you see the
Yeah.
met need?
Yeah.
That goes on for like, have just a few for those. And then they have like this many, like 2.5 pages or something like that for the unmet needs,
Oh
which
my
is
gosh.
interesting. I don't know what that implies, but when a person will describe the situation, well, earlier when you're calling people a bunch of idiots, of course you can feel a bunch of emotions, but one of them might be angered, enraged, furious, incensed. You see it on the left there.
Yeah.
It could be, so if you look in the aversion list, I feel very bothered. I feel very displeased. I'm not sure anybody's going to say that. A huge one, which I think is one of the most potent emotions we talked about yesterday, was disgust.
Oh
Oh,
yeah.
what a powerful feeling that.
Oh, we're
Um,
going to have another show on that one.
yeah, I think that's a really amazing one.
That one
Um,
was, yeah, I can't wait to do that one.
and so earlier I mentioned, I read from this list here, the embarrassment list, ashamed and chagrined. You know, when you're doing this, you get better at it. And I think it is helpful to have a feelings list. Buy Karen's book when it comes out.
Yeah. Well, what should we title this then? It won't be, I feel,
You know, you might want to throw failure in the subtitle, you know?
oh
Um,
yeah.
you know, it could feel a lot of ways to fail. But if you want to do this story as primarily featuring shame, that's because I think in the past you've featured one emotion at a time, right?
I feel embarrassed when I fail.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, I
Yeah, I
wonder,
think that really does, think about kids who, miss all of their words on their spelling test and everyone else passes, in the class. That kid can feel embarrassed. And, I think it's the compassion piece where the other kids in the class aren't thinking about the one who's left behind.
mhm. Yeah, you know what? And a parents and teachers guide on the back could explain that just because we um, express our emotions to someone doesn't mean that's going to make the discussion always turn out right. In fact, that's why people have a fear of intimacy. That's why they call it vulnerability, because vulnerable means you could be hurt. I'm not enunciating very well. Vulnerable means you could be hurt.
Yeah.
But without opening yourself up in appropriate situations to the potential of being hurt, you also don't open yourself up to getting closer to someone learning about what you are inside and accepting it and approving it and maybe even liking it.
Yeah.
That's what we really all thrive on.